Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of No Such Thing as a Fish, where we were joined at the Soho Theatre in London by the incredible Cariad Lloyd. Now, if you are a regular listener to No Such Thing as a Fish, you will know, of course, who Cariad is. She's a very good friend of ours, she's a comedian, she's an actor, she's a podcaster, she's just an all-round genius, let's be honest. She has a book out, which you definitely should check out. It's called You Are Not Alone. It's about death, but that sounds like it's going to be depressing, but it really isn't. It's extremely uplifting, that book, and there's loads of facts in there as well. It's definitely one that I think you'll really, really enjoy. And the other thing to say is that Cariad does an improvised show called Ostentatious. Now, this is a really amazing show. What happens is you turn up, someone in the audience gives them a hitherto lost, let's say, Jane Austen play title that they've made up. The guys have never heard it before, and they do an entire Jane Austen play completely improvised. It is absolutely stunningly brilliant. If you haven't seen it, you can't miss it. If you have seen it, go again, because it's different every single night. And they are about to do another run at London's West End at the Arts Theatre. Now, the best way to find out about those tickets is to go to ostentatiousimpro.com. That's AUSTENTATIOUSIMPRO.com. But let's be honest, who types in URLs these days? Just go to a search engine, search for Ostentatious, and you will find all the information there. Anyway, really hope you enjoy this week's show with Cariad Lloyd. All that's left to say is on with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of No Such Thing as a Fish, a weekly podcast. This week coming to you live from the Soho Theatre in London. My name is Dan Schreiber. I am sitting here with James Harkin, Andrew Hunter-Murray, and Cariad Lloyd. And once again, we have gathered around the microphones with our 4 favorite facts from the last 7 days. And in no particular order, here we go. Starting with fact number 1, and that is Andy.
My fact is that the maximum PDF file you can send is bigger than Belgium.
Can we replace Belgium? Just with a PDF
of Belgium?
Oh,
yes,
Belgium.
we can. Okay, in fact, it's bigger than that. Okay, right. The maximum PDF size you can send is a square with sides that are 381 kilometers long. That is bigger than Belgium, Monaco, San Marino, Liechtenstein, Malta, Andorra, Luxembourg, Montenegro, Slovenia, Albania, and Moldova combined.
Whoa.
It is huge.
That's massive.
It's mega.
Has anyone sent something that big?
Unclear. Unclear.
I worked out that if you wanted to print it out on A4 paper, it would take 2.3 trillion pieces.
Whoa.
And if I did it on my printer at home, I could have started it off at the time when the first human fossils were appearing in the fossil records, and it would be just about finishing now.
No.
Subject to jams and cartridge replacements. That's brilliant.
That's incredible.
That's so good, yeah. I should say where I got this from. I saw it, a guy called Steve Bobrick put it up on Twitter, and basically, and we should say, this appears to only be an Adobe Acrobat limit.
Damn them, controlling us as always.
Yeah, theoretically, there could be a bigger PDF out there.
What?
I know.
So this is what, in the Adobe rules, it says that this is the maximum you're allowed or something?
Yeah, it's the Adobe Acrobat. It's 15 million inches by 15 million inches. You know.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the rules. It's not even...
No, it's their internal limit, but the file format itself might not be bound by the Adobe.
They would probably just have to click and write 25 million, and maybe we'd be able to get even bigger.
Maybe. But I don't think anyone's ever actually sent one that's this big.
No, why would you? It would be insane.
Is that a email attachment, or are we talking WeTransfer here? WeTransfer. Right.
Oh, I think that's a Dropbox.
Is
I
it?
don't think you can WeTransfer that.
Wow.
So PDFs,
Yeah?
pretty dry. Pretty dry.
It's amazing. When we send each other our facts round, we have to then go and research them, of course. And Andy sent us the PDF and said, maybe it's the most boring fact you've ever sent.
And James said, it's not even close. Not even top 10. But, I mean, so we can get on to more general stuff. But I do just want to say that Adobe, Adobe Acrobat, the program that do the PDFs, is named after some mud.
Named after...
Some mud.
Oh.
Adobe, it's a building material, isn't it?
It is.
You make it out of,
Yeah.
poo and wool, I think.
Here it's mud.
James, don't attempt poo and wool. And be like, this is it, we can make a house.
That's the worst Three Little Pigs ever, isn't it? And the fourth little pig made his house out of poo and wool.
And the wolf said, I'm all right, actually. You guys, you stay in there, it's fine.
Yeah. I should just explain the mud thing. Sorry, I want to... Because otherwise I could feel the tension in the room.
They were waiting. They were just
when's he going to explain about the mud? The founder of Adobe. I'm sorry.
You thought you come to a live podcast. This is a conference for Adobe. And this is how they get their employees in.
There's a creek which goes past the home of the founder, who's called John Warnock, and it has this mud in it. It's this very malleable clay. I did go on a little wild goose chase trying to find out who the original Adobe Acrobat actually was. There wasn't one. There wasn't.
Right.
That would make it an interesting story.
Okay, and so he named it after
Some mud.
some mud by the...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But it's malleable. But PDFs are...
Famously inflexible,
Yeah,
you're right.
it's just
Completely
square.
unchangeable.
Like, it's just like, I'm just sending you paper. Like, why did he think, oh, yeah, this clay, this reminds me of my...
And Acrobat's so flexible as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is
God, we busted
completely
this wide
wrong about
open.
this. The rules, the idea that this is what they would say, this is the limits to what you have. I find it kind of funny when there are computer rules that are just so makeshift and sort of seemingly, why would you ever say that out loud? Apple III, I don't know if anyone is old enough to remember Apple III, but so it was their third.
No way, Apple III was the third. What? This is crazy.
It was a hard drive basically that suffered because there was no fan on it, and Steve Jobs had this thing where he just hated the sound of fans. And so he was like, let's not include one. Yeah, and so it overheated all the time. Oh. And when it overheated, it meant that any disk going in would suddenly just melt. And so you're pulling out the hard drive disk and so on. Yeah, so it was a big, big problem. And one of the employees of Apple was so angry with it that he slammed it down out of frustration onto his desk and discovered that made it work again. So if you called up Apple saying it does not work, their official line was, lift the computer up by 2 inches and just drop it on the table. And that's what fixed it. That was the official line that came from them.
Percussive maintenance, they call that, don't they?
What's that?
Just whacking something and hope it works.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't think we've mentioned this before. We might have done. Do you know what the longest a computer has been left running is? Or the longest running computer
I haven't turned
ever?
my laptop off since 2016.
Pretty good. 7 years.
You don't need to. It just rests. It's asleep. Then it wakes up again.
Yeah. Do you mean
Nothing
not even
works.
closing the lid?
I reckon this one might not even have a lid.
Whoa.
Right.
James is right. I didn't, and I was about to say the longest running computer on Earth, but then I didn't say that. Clue.
So it's not on Earth.
That's right.
Right. Is it in a spaceship?
It's in a spaceship.
Right.
It's the Voyager ones. It's the Voyager ones,
really?
which have been on since more than 40 years
The
now.
70s, I guess?
Yeah, since the 70s. Yeah.
And they're still working.
They're still working. It's a pair of link computers on board Voyager, which was just sent towards the edge of the solar system, and it's still going. Each one has 70 kilobytes of memory. I mean, they're really tiny.
Are they like 1970s computers, though? Are they like old
They're not
school?
huge. They're not room sized.
Oh,
No,
right.
but they're much smaller.
If
than
they
that,
stop
but-
working, they'll slam them into Pluto, won't they?
They got a big monitor, and you have to run like CS-DOS on it.
Yeah. But no,
Thanks.
they had a.
I know some things about computers.
They had this really big problem in 2015 because the last of the original programmers was a guy called Larry Zottarelli, and he retired. And they were stuffed because it was like you need to learn ancient cuneiform
couldn't
of
ring
computer
him.
languages
Right.
to
get it.
this. Like no one
Really?
is teaching these computer languages.
yeah.
that
He's
you use
still
for
alive. You're not dead. Just call him up.
He's old. He's retired. He doesn't want
Get
to be.
him to write out a handover sheet so that,
Yeah,
so that people know.
I'm sure NASA know
He's
about.
like, no, I'm done. That's it. You've had my time.
It's hard. It's hard to learn the systems required. No. Okay.
Yeah, fair enough. There was a computer that analyzed 4,000 computer science papers, and it came up with what they call the best computer scientists in the world. They describe him as the Michael Jordan of computer science.
Wow.
Do you know who it is?
No.
It's Michael Jordan.
Is it someone with the same name, or is it the
He's
actual?
got the same.
Okay.
The Michael Jordan of computer science is Michael
Everyone,
Jordan.
call your kids Michael Jordan. That's clear. It's nominative determinism. Just
Wow.
Michael Jordan.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
Do they refer to Michael Jordan as the Michael Jordan of basketball? Have you heard of Fernando Corbato?
I can't tell until you pronounce it
What's
properly.
I want to be the Fernando Corbato of something, though.
Yeah, well, he was the Fernando Corbato of... He died in 2019. He was 93 years old, and he invented something we all have,
Ooh.
and we've got loads of them.
Personalities.
Daddy issues.
Nudge yourself closer to the topic at hand.
I'll go for transistors. No?
Passwords.
Oh,
The man who invented the computer password.
What was his mother's maiden name?
Michael Jordan. But with the numbers changed for the letters. Yeah.
I think it was the 50s that he invented it, and it was because most computers worked on one thing at a time because they were the size of rooms, and they were they had processing power but not much, and he was trying to work out a way, like a timeshare system, so lots of people could work on the same computer, different tasks, and so he just reasoned that that's the best way of hiding your files from each other inside the computer, and invented that. Yeah. In 2003.
That is, you're right, it was a sexy fact. But the thing is, we don't whistle at facts anymore.
Well, wait, I mean...
It's not okay. I'm sorry, I don't want to be a downer, but...
Actually, Cariad, it made me feel empowered.
There's always one working against the movement. What can I say?
In 2003, a survey found that 90% of office workers passing through Waterloo Station would give away their computer password in exchange for a biro.
Really?
Just a biro, not even a chocolate.
Well, another survey in 2003 found that 70% of people would do it in exchange for some chocolate.
100%.
34% of people just gave their password without even needing the bribe. So what's your password? They just told them.
That's so good.
But that was in the past when you only needed like 4, right? 'Cause now
I know, yeah.
so many, there's no way you can even remember them.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I got a quick story about a Microsoft laptop that there was a mystery. It kept crashing. This is 2005. So the culprit of the problem was Janet Jackson.
Is it the real Janet Jackson?
The real
this time?
Janet Jackson. Right. And it was her song Rhythm Nation.
Oh.
And what it was is that the frequency of it was at such the same level of which the disc was spinning that it would send the disc into a wobble and it would crash. And even if Rhythm Nation was playing from one laptop but being heard by another laptop,
Oh my God.
that would crash as
Like
well.
dog whistles, they'd just be like, is it me?
Yeah, exactly. So it was, so Janet Jackson was responsible for a whole software update or whatever of a Microsoft laptop.
She's constantly innovating.
She is.
Do you know the? You won't know this, but can you guess the picture?
What is it?
No.
We need more.
That was almost a sentence, but not quite.
No, sorry.
So the picture which has the most pixels in it, so the image that has the most pixels in the world has 102 terapixels.
Okay.
Security. No,
It feels
come on
nice,
now.
doesn't it?
No,
It feels nice.
that did not feel nice.
That fact was just minding its own business.
Okay, get ready to whistle.
Okay.
Can you guess what the picture is of?
Belgium.
Is it like Tetris, just to give a t-shirt, or is it
no.
like very pixelated?
No,
not
it's
clear.
It's pixelated in the fact that it has a lot of pixels in it.
It's not like okay.
But basically, if you made it really small, it would be really clear. That's the point.
I'll say a big telescope thing like the universe.
Mona Lisa.
Oh
always
gosh,
is.
no! It is the world's biggest penis.
Wow.
Well, welcome to the whistle. This is your perfect partner.
Wait, do you mean it's the world's biggest picture of a penis or the world's biggest penis?
Let's clarify. We need
It's
that.
a picture of a normal-sized penis, but it's the world's biggest image.
And what's a normal sized penis? Just asking for a friend.
Dan.
So many issues. If they made each pixel 1
That's
inch,
not a normal sized penis. You see? Excellent.
That also wasn't really an inch, but we'll not go into that. If you made each pixel an inch, it would wrap around the Earth 2.7 times this image. And if you... If you printed it out to the same specs as a billboard, it would be as tall as 16,408 Empire State Buildings.
Right.
And if you 3D printed that, you would be able to poke the International Space Station.
And you need permission before you do that. Okay?
It was invented by a former NASA intern who does not wish to be identified.
Stop the podcast.
Stop the podcast. Hi, everyone. We'd like to tell you that this week we are sponsored by Babbel.
Yes, Babbel is the brilliant language learning app. It allows you to learn wherever, whenever. They've got loads of languages and it expands your horizons. You know, Charlemagne once said, possibly, that he who speaks a second language has a second soul.
Interesting. He probably would have said that in French, which, if you did a bit more Babbel, Andy, you'd probably be able to translate. Even if you do a job like we do, where you do a lot of like mental stuff, I don't mean like crazy stuff. I mean like lots of reading, coming up with ideas, stuff like that. I learn a language in my spare time, and it really uses a different part of your brain, and it's almost like refreshing.
Exactly. And if you do want to learn a language, Babbel makes it very easy. The lessons are about 15 minutes long. If you're just waiting for a bus or a train, you just pop onto Babbel, have a lesson, and exactly, it's fun. It makes it enjoyable the way Babbel do it.
And right now, Babbel is offering our listeners 3 months for free with the purchase of a 3-month subscription. And the way you get that is to go to babbel.com, that's babbel.com/podcast23, that's the numbers 23, and use the promo code NOFISH, that's all one word.
That's right. You can get 3 months of a second soul for free. Just go to babbel, babbel.com/podcast23 and put in that promo code NOFISH.
Babbel, language learning that works. Okay, on with the podcast.
On with the show.
We need to move on to our next fact, guys. It is time for fact number 2, and that is Cariad.
Oh, yeah. During the 17th century, when you died, your relatives were legally forced to bury you wearing wool, whether you liked it or not. And there was for no other reason than to support the ailing wool industry. I love this fact, okay? So basically there was an act by Parliament in 1666 that overnight said everybody has to be buried in wool. And it sounds like, oh, okay, but previously to that, nobody was buried in wool, ever. That was like an unusual thing to happen. You were buried in a linen shroud, like Jesus in the Bible.
And no coffin, right?
Sometimes they did have coffins.
Sometimes they had coffins,
It was unusual, sorry.
Yeah.
But it was very you would mostly be wrapped in a shroud and just shoved in the earth.
Yeah.
And because the wool industry was so important and they were so worried about linen coming from France, basically, classic fucking French linen coming over here taking our coffins. The government basically said, I know...
How is your GB News show coming on, Cariad?
Listen, the British wool! I am sweating, but I am British. So many people were employed in the wool industry. 12% of the population worked in the wool industry. And it brought in a huge amount of money. So they said, well, we'll just make it a law that you have to be buried in a wool suit, in a coffin lined with wool. And if you weren't, you were fined £5, which is the equivalent of £550 today.
Yeah.
So, and you had to then, so basically, initially everyone was like, no, fuck you. Where are we going to get this from? No one has this. We don't have a history of this. And like the linens they used to wrap them in would be like your family linen. You know, so you would have something that's been like a tablecloth and you would keep it all night and then you would sew them together. The women would sew it together and wrap everybody up. So it's like a very nice thing. And so people weren't following the law. So then they made it that you had to go to the keeper of the peace. 2 members of your family had to sign an affidavit saying, we have done this, otherwise you'd be fined. So you had to go to the church and swear, like based on the Bible, go, we buried them in wool, sorry.
Yeah, there was an oath you had to read, right?
Yeah, a special oath, which I've got here, saying, no corpse or any person, except any person that shall die of the plague, fuck them. That's That's because they thought it lived on in the wool. Shall be buried in any shift, sheet or shroud or anything whatsoever made or mingled with flax, hemp, silk, hair, gold or silver in any stuff or thing other than what is made of sheep's wool only. That's...
Yeah.
And they had to say that.
But the fine that you mentioned, the
Yes, it's
£5
£5
fine,
fine.
if you grassed someone up as being buried in non-wool, then you could get half of the £5.
Yeah, you get £2.50.
And this is the really clever thing. If you had buried your relative in linen and you knew that you were likely to be caught anyway, you could go and grass up on your own relative, get half the fine back into the family. You've only paid half the fine.
Did they do that?
Yeah, they did.
Some people did,
Rich people did that. So some people who like there were certain areas where it was very much didn't approve of it, and so rich people would be like, well, fuck it, we'll just pay
Well, you
£2.
said
just
that
paid the
like
fine,
one of the rules was you couldn't bury in gold.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think if you're burying someone in gold, probably you can afford the £5.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a study that was done between 1678 and 1707. Less than 1%, and this was in Henstridge.
Yes.
Less than 1% of burials in the churchyard were in linen, so following this rule. But then when you went inside the church itself, it was between 9 and 13% that were then
and they're the
linen.
richer people who are in the church.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
see. One interesting part of this is that, okay, so you started to have loads more extra linen and extra cloth around because you were using the wool for the burials. And newspapers were made out of recycled cloth. So that's why you call it a rag now, because they used to use the rags, turn it into paper, and then make newspapers.
Wow.
And so they had all of these extra bits of linen, which meant they could make more newspapers. And there was a huge boom of newspapers around that time, and this sort of fed into that.
Wow.
They were pleased about it. Everyone else was pissed off. Yeah. And there's amazing. Have you heard of Decca Mitford? I know I've talked to you guys about her before.
Yeah,
She's
one of the Jessica Mitford.
Jessica Mitford,
Right.
one of the Mitford sisters, who are like these socialite 20th century British figures who were involved in every single thing that happened. She went to America. She was a communist. She went to America, kind of disowned her family. But in the 60s, she wrote this book called An American Way of Death.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like, it's very odd because she was a British socialite that had like gone to fight in Spain and then moved to America. Very unusual story. But the book that she wrote basically changed the American funeral industry, because what was happening was they were just basically rinsing people for money. And when someone died, they used to kind of perform plastic surgery on them and embalm them, and so make them look, or she describes like basically nip and tuck the tissue across the body with implants, pins and fillers to mask blemishes and swellings that come with age and illness, before sewing the face into the most attractive and youthful expression possible.
Sewing it.
Teeth were whitened, makeup applied, and the corpse was dressed in its final outfit.
Yes, I would like all of this. Yep. Sorry.
And then there was a special kind of bra designed for post-mortem form restoration.
I'll pass on that.
Yeah.
But
So she wrote this book exposing...
Why is Andy in a bra? It was part of the package.
She wrote this amazing book that exposed, basically they were preying on the vulnerable. So these poor people who had no money would end up paying like thousands of dollars for what was considered like a proper funeral.
Right.
And her book was like in the bestsellers for years. David Bowie listed it as one of his favourite ever books, top 100 books, because she changed everything. And they were putting so many chemicals in at that time. It was so dangerous.
Right.
And that's why like funeral makers were dying of cancer from inhaling all the formaldehyde. Grim.
Yeah. There's one kind of fun thing they used to
Sure,
do.
because I brought it down, as I
Bring
do.
us back to the fun stuff. This is in ancient Roman funerals. You could pay an actor, and a lot of people did this, you would pay an actor to dress up and wear a mask as the person who died.
Yes.
And then in the party, they'd kind of mingle with everyone.
yes.
Pretending that they were still alive and like parodying the things that they did.
Oh wait, is it? I don't want to be parodied, but I would love someone to be doing some of my good stuff. Like some. I'd even write some lines for them to. I think that's a great idea.
But Andy at a funeral,
I know.
some dude walking around going, "Did you know the largest PDF file was?"
God, thank God he died.
That's amazing.
Look, wool.
Whoa.
Oh, sorry, bring
Let's
it
get
back to wool. We went
Let's
off
do
to
it.
death.
Wool is an amazing material. It's like a super substance that I had no idea about. So
Have you not heard of wool before now?
I didn't know how good wool was, basically.
okay.
So it's covered in scales. If you zoom in, you look at it with a microscope, it's covered in scales. So liquid water slides off the outside, right?
Okay.
So it's very hydrophobic, I guess. So it's good at protecting you from water.
Yeah.
But it not absorbs, it adsorbs water easily, right? So if you have water vapor near it, it kind of makes its way into the wool, like underneath the scales. So once the water gets in, that keeps you nicely cool, for example.
Wait, so sorry, it's pushing off water.
It pushes off liquid water, but it takes in water vapor. Okay,
So
and
you're
that releases
supposed to
heat.
wear like a wool jumper in summer and then in winter as well. It keeps
Oh, sorry,
you cool
yeah.
in summer.
Okay.
It releases heat, so that can also warm you up, even if it's got water vapor inside it. So that's
Okay.
a way of keeping you warm. So if you fall in a river that's freezing cold, and then you get to dry land, be wearing wool. Like, don't wear cotton if you've done that.
Right.
Basically, it's like, because you'll be much less harmed if you're wearing wool, which has repelled the outside water. It's not wet on the inside.
Yeah.
That's a top tip.
Yeah.
It's a top tip.
If there's two of you on like a raft,
Yeah.
and only one of you can stay on the raft, the one who's wearing wool gets pushed in, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Note to
Exactly
self,
like that.
don't be on a raft with James.
They've invented a new kind of sheep this year. That's exciting.
A new kind of sheep.
They've bred a multifunctional sheep for the first time, which is very
Okay,
exciting.
let's go for the functions.
Does it do your diary, organised, cook?
It just does wool and meat, basically. But that's
And
new.
have the two been mutually exclusive before that?
I think this is the most multifunctional sheep they've ever come up with.
Wow. The sheep 3.
It's a sheep 3. Yeah.
Is it not working? Just drop it. Just drop it from a short height.
Well, that's incredible. A new sheep.
Thanks.
That's
Yeah,
amazing. I saw an amazing picture online, which I want to go see in person. If you go to, which museum is it? I think it's in the Science Museum. Yeah, it's a Science Museum. There's a jumper there made of wool, which is on display. Can you guess why the Science Museum would have a notable jumper of wool?
Go on
Knitted
an
by-
expedition.
That's
Go
good.
somewhere.
No. So it's
Not been to the North Pole.
not been to the North Pole.
Knitted by Einstein. It was knitted by some famous scientist.
No.
Okay.
Was there a famous sheep?
Dolly's
There we go.
jumper.
It is wool from the first mammal ever cloned, Dolly. The sheared wool
great.
turned into a jumper.
And they've only made one.
They've
Idiots.
yeah.
And
It's got sheep on it. It's really beautiful.
Oh,
It's
nice.
well, it's not beautiful, but it's a bit
All right.
cartoony. Pretty cool though, eh?
It's very cool.
The wool industry was so important for Britain that they had to do loads of laws for it. So there was this thing with the burials, but there was another thing where they tried to get rid of all the wolves because obviously the wolves were killing the sheep. So Edward I paid one guy, Peter Cobbett, to destroy all the wolves in Britain, which he managed.
Wow.
Oh my
By the
God.
way. We don't have any
Pete, what are
wolves
you up
anymore.
to? Oh, just killing all the wolves in Britain. But
And William the Conqueror would grant land to people in Northumberland and Cumberland on the condition that they would defend the land from any wolves and any Scotsmen.
It was mean putting them second in the list. Wow.
did you know? I'm sure you knew this about the wool sack that is in the House of Parliament.
Oh, the,
You know that?
Is that
House
the
of
is that the
Lords?
cushion
thing
that they sit
It's
on?
a giant. It looks like a sort of giant cushion called the wool sack, and it's where the Lord Speaker sits. And that is was introduced by some. Oh, I had it written down. I've lost it. Some king, basically a long time ago, to commemorate how important the wool trade is.
Yeah.
Yes,
And now
that's
it's
right.
stuffed with wool, a blend of wool from Britain and the other wool-producing nations of the Commonwealth, the ones we stole and now it's
Common wolf, more like.
Jesus.
I'd say so.
A slow hand clap
That
of
didn't,
one audience
it
member.
didn't feel empowering. It didn't feel.
Just on the wool sack, I think that it's centuries old. Like it's really,
it's
old.
really old.
And in 1938, they opened it up and they found, it's horsehair, completely full of horsehair. Full of wool. Scandal.
That
I
is
thought it was supposed to be
scandalous.
full of wool.
So now they filled it with the Commonwealth wool. Yeah.
Do you know where we almost had wool?
Where?
It's such a, like, on
Yeah,
our
where?
bodies. Do you mean like humans
On
used
our
to have,
bodies, yes.
the legs,
No.
the arms?
No.
What do you mean
Running
almost
short.
had wool?
Head.
The teeth
No.
warmer.
No.
Inside the body.
Yes.
Oh.
What? How drunk are we?
We used to have
Some kind of
No,
organ.
no, we didn't used to. We almost had.
Didn't we
What's this?
almost have the wool
We almost had
inside?
wool in our
In lungs.
lungs.
Heart.
Boobies. We almost had woolen
Extraordinary
boobies.
claims require extraordinary evidence, Dan.
So, In the 1950s, there was a lot of experiments going on.
In the 1950s?
Yeah, there were a lot of,
We didn't get boobs in the 1950s as a species.
Oh, we did.
But what we did have was plastic surgery where people were having their breasts enhanced, and there were many materials that were tested out as what we would be using for
That
breast.
is an itchy
and
tit. And so you do get itchy tits. If that is made of wool, that is...
Itchy on the inside.
Oh, that's...
They tried wool?
They tried wool. They tried sponges. They tried ivory balls. They tried...
Ivory?
Yeah, they tried a lot of stuff. And then eventually it was the
Bloody hell.
silicone implants that they worked in.
Sponges, so you could maybe decrease and increase them depending on how much water you put.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds good.
Anyway, I need to move us on to our next
Okay.
fact.
Oh,
Do you want to
okay.
say one more thing before we do?
Well, I was just going to talk about the wool factories that we had. So a lot of the wool factories in the north, they would have families who basically lived in the shadow of them, and the factories would kind of look after them, feed them. They would go to church with the factory owners, all that kind of stuff. And I was reading about one called the Fox's Woolen Mill. They invented khaki, the stuff that
The khaki?
The khaki. The thing you use to get into your car. Yeah. No, the
That's
material.
not what I thought you said, sorry.
No, the khaki material.
Cool.
And they said that the children would get free woolen clothing, and they would be sewn into their woolen underwear in September and then let out again in May.
Wow.
I think they must have had an opening.
Yeah, there's an engineering problem there.
I think so.
Wow.
But yeah,
No,
imagine that.
Put a tube in, you stay warm.
Yeah.
But being sewn into your underwear for 6 months of the year.
Olivia Newton-John was sewn into those trousers in Greece,
That's true.
and they had to unpick her every time she needed
There was
to
a story, wasn't there, that Franz Ferdinand, when he was shot, he'd been sewn into his uniform and...
You meant the band. I was like, what?
They're going, take me out, take me out.
It is time for fact number 3, and that is my fact. My fact this week is that in 1914, women were only allowed to visit the Natural History Museum if a man agreed to sign a note promising that they would behave themselves. So this is, as I say, 1914. I got this fact, by the way, from Dr. Fern Riddell. She's a historian. She's written books about suffragettes and the history of sex and all that sort. She's brilliant. You can find her on Twitter. And she put up this link, which was for one of the museums by an author called Cariad Lloyd. And it was the story of suffragettes. And during 1912 to 1914, there was so much damage that was going on in the name of trying to get their message out, much the way that we see modern protesting, that they would do quite sort of big acts when they of destroying things, and museums were a particular target. And so museums basically had to shut down for a while. You had to go by appointment in some cases. But women specifically had a note that was presented to a man, and they would have to hand in at the door, that then gave them access. And if they did damage something, the man would be liable for the damage that they did, and the woman. Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
It was wild, wasn't it? The Natural History Museums weren't sure exactly what they might target. The head of the museum said that unless explosives are used, the large mammals are not likely to suffer very seriously. But they were bombing things at the time, so there was a chance they might.
They're not worried about women's rights. They're like, fucking hell, those elephants. They need protecting.
Well, they
And
were
the
mostly
dodo.
bothered about the coral. Apparently.
Famously, the
sure.
order of priorities: men, coral, women.
Yeah. But it was such a big deal. Lloyd's of London actually started issuing householders' comprehensive insurance policies that covered damages by airplanes, riots, and suffragettes. No. Yeah.
Yes.
Like that was
Feels like
part
a
of your
gimmick.
insurance.
If, as a woman, you did go to a museum, you had to surrender your parcels, your muff, and your umbrella at the door, because they were all used to conceal objects you did. Come on.
Well, the
stop giggling,
suffragettes,
you know.
they actually,
That-
the suffragettes came out saying that we're going to put hammers in our muffs.
Yeah.
Like,
You'd be amazed what some women can do.
Muff Hammer is a
Muff
good,
Hammer.
cool nickname for a suffragette, isn't it?
WWE Muff Hammer.
Making her way to the ring.
She's got a note from her husband. But he hasn't signed it. Psych.
Oh, also, we should all be saying suffragettes.
Oh, really?
Because they were very, very initially, the word was coined by a newspaper writer, and they were originally referred to as suffragettes, and they took it on because they said, we're going to get the vote.
It was the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
The Daily Mail coined the word suffragette, whatever you want to
But as a slam of a word.
It was
say.
a
Yeah,
slam,
it's a slam
they
because
took it
they
on,
were
yeah.
not the nice ones, distinguished from the Women's Social and Political Union.
The suffragists were
Yeah,
the ones who
suffragists. Who were being
were
peaceful.
peaceful campaigners.
But then it became like, we are suffragettes, fuck you.
Yeah.
Just on the museums, just one last thing. The assistant keeper of the National Portrait Gallery, who was called James Milner, said that if women are to be admitted into public galleries, there seems to be no alternative but to handcuff their hands behind their backs and to put up a grill in front of all the pictures to stop them headbutting them.
Sensible policies for a safer Britain. Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
So depressing.
Yes, they really, really got up people's noses, I think it's fair to say.
That's one word for it. Do you know about Emily Wilding Davidson?
Yeah.
Davidson, the one who threw herself under the King's horse.
Oh, yeah.
So famously, she was the first human casualty. But I was reading about her, and she was actually like super violent and had been for a very long time, was like throwing rocks. She kept trying to throw rocks at Lloyd George, but kept mistaking someone. And she was so violent that Pankhurst was like, get her out. Like, this is too much.
Really?
We think she's going to do something nuts. Yeah, because she was just like attacking people, throwing us other people.
Because they all did jiu-jitsu, didn't they?
They were trained in jiu-jitsu by one of the suffragettes. Edith Garrod led the teaching because she knew how to do jiu-jitsu. And the idea behind the training was that appointed bodyguards would surround leaders, like the Pankhurst, basically, so that they had people in front of them to do jiu-jitsu.
But they also had big wooden clubs concealed about their person.
In their muff hammers.
Well, I don't... like, no muff is big enough to hide these clubs. They had to hide them in their
Maybe,
dresses.
you don't know.
Oh, come on.
I was reading about the slow pace of female emancipation. Just that Saudi Arabia gave women the right to vote in 2015, leaving Vatican City as the only place where women's suffrage is still denied today.
Right.
Yeah, well, Switzerland only got it in 1991 as the whole country.
Oh.
So it was 1971 that the country had universal suffrage,
Yep.
but all the cantons were allowed to vote on it themselves.
And they're like the sort of counties.
They're like the counties, yeah, but they have a lot of things that they can kind of decide by themselves. And there was one canton, the Appenzell Innerrhoden canton, that voted against women's suffrage in 73, 82 and 1990.
Fucking hell. Come on, Canton, get with it.
I know. And the thing is, it's slightly weird because the way that they vote there, they don't like go into a voting booth. They all go into the town hall square and kind of shout. And
Fuck women! I said it 15 years ago and I stand by it! Shut up, Sandra!
yeah. And then in 1991, the federal government had to step in and say, look, this is the rule, guys.
Guys, you're embarrassing us.
embarrassing.
You're an
Yeah,
embarrassing
that's
uncle. This is
mortifying.
getting really embarrassing.
Have you heard of the board game Suffragetto?
No. Have you heard of the board game Pankersquith?
Yeah, they came out roughly at the same time.
Really?
Yeah.
What's yours?
My one is a game whereby it kind of looks like a chessboard and you have all these pieces, and on one side you're team suffragette and then the other side you're team police, and you need to get as many...
I want this game. This sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, there's only one remaining copy of it, and it's in the Bodleian Library.
I'm going to go with my muff and steal him before I headbutt a painting.
I think you used to be able to like download, I was going to say PDFs, but I think you could like download the board and stuff.
Oh.
And
Yeah,
have the
right,
rules and
cool.
things,
Yeah, but Pankersquith, because it was Asquith, the Prime
Asquith
Minister?
was the Prime Minister at
Yeah.
the time, and this was 1909.
Yeah.
And it was a board game. You had to get across the board and avoid arrest. It was the same kind of premise. Yeah.
But the violence of the suffragette movement was a part of this game of Suffragetto, because if you caught one of the suffragettes, they went to prison, and if you caught one of the policemen, they went to hospital.
Yes. Yeah. And this was made by the Suffragettes, I think, the board
Yeah, I
game.
think so,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it was their own
They had a lot
issued
of
game.
merch.
Marketing, merch.
They had a load of merch.
Women love merch. We'll buy a tote bag. We don't care what's on it. We do not care.
What other merch did they have?
Oh, they had sort of scarves and they had badges and there were lots of
Well, the
postcards.
colours, the big thing was the colour,
Yeah.
the purple, white, and green,
right,
and then
yeah,
they
of
put that
course.
on jewellery as well, and you'd have it on rings, and it was like a secret. You could wear the
Yeah.
colours separately, and everyone would be like, oh, I know what you vote for.
That was one of the things of the at the 2012 Olympics, they had a suffragette display as part of
the opening ceremony.
The opening ceremony, and someone came out as Emily Davison wearing the purple sash that was Emily Davison's. That's the genuine article. Yeah,
Wow.
which is pretty cool.
We should probably say there is a bit of a debate about whether suffragette tactics won the day in the end, because they suspended all militant activities at the start of the First World War.
Yes.
And then by the end of the war, women were so integrated in industry, factories,
Are
all
you
of that.
saying war's good? Is that where that's going?
Andy, or are you saying the suffragettes are bad?
Yeah. Which one, Andy? Because the live audience and the people listening at home would like to know.
Well, actually, I'm probably saying both.
Welcome to Jim B News.
But no, there is a debate, isn't there?
Yeah,
about
there's
did
definitely.
actually did they achieve anything? Because they made themselves very, very hated at the time, and then the impression was that by the end of the war, that women were just so much
But
more
then
in
would that
society.
have happened without them doing that movement in the first place?
Don't know. Yeah,
Well, you
it'd been
don't,
4
so
long
yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's definitely like the toss is argued,
The
isn't
toss
it?
is argued.
Yeah.
Can I quickly, just speaking of people hiding things in their muffs, it just reminded me of my favourite headline of all time. So the author Cormac McCarthy died earlier this year, and it was a headline that I saw years ago. This is the headline. So he only just makes a cameo, and this is not really to do with him.
Okay.
Cormac McCarthy's ex-wife pulls gun from vagina during argument over aliens. Tell me you're clicking on that link immediately.
The Daily Telegraph has changed, hasn't it? What was that? Where was that?
It was in a newspaper.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
In a rag.
Yeah, by Vince Mancini.
In a rag.
Yeah.
Checks out.
Anyway, yeah, I've been wanting to say that for years on this podcast. Okay, it is time for our final fact of the show, and that is James.
Okay, my fact this week is that a designer from Indonesia who recycles cow dung has found a way to make stools from stools.
Very nice.
Amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just a joke that stools and stools are the same thing. But this is a thing that happened. This was a display from the last Singapore Design Week, which I read about. It's all about upcycling. So they made lighting from old washing machine pipes. They made rugs from dog hair. And this guy called Adhi Nugraha has his team basically at his university has taken this dung, they remove the water, that gets rid of the smell, they add a load of wood glue and stuff like that, and then they mould it into anything you want. You can get speakers, you can get stools, you can get flower pots, all sorts.
That's
and
very
it's just
cool.
a thing.
That's interesting. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a good way of recycling poo.
A lot of it is burned, isn't it? Cow dung in India, which is really bad for the environment. I mean, cows themselves are very bad for the environment, and the dung is full of methane, and burning it just is a bad idea. But it can be used to coat walls.
Yeah.
That's another thing is used.
Adobe, for instance.
Yeah.
Adobe.
Poo and wool combined.
Well, so I was reading a thing about astronaut poo and what it might be useful for.
Oh, yeah.
And this is an exciting development. So it might be in future that astronauts are able to power their own spaceship using polymers from their own poo. So that's thrilling. As in, you can send astronauts to Mars and be like, make your own way home when you've.
Here's some fruit and fibre.
Yeah, exactly.
See you
yeah.
in 6 months.
And the other thing is they might be able to grow their own. There's a bit of a gross out factor, but trying to disregard it. So they might be able to grow their own food from. No, I said control the out factor.
No one's ready.
There were scientists at Pennsylvania in 2017. They researched this thing, a bioreactor, right?
Uh-huh.
So you effectively you poo in the tube, and then
Poo tube.
poo tube. That's a good name for it. That's actually going to make it much more palatable to people, I think. And it produces gas. It sort of gives off various biological gases, and that fuels a microbial goo.
Oh, God, that is the worst word you've used so far. We were all on board until microbial goo arrived.
Let's not be squeamish. Come on.
Microbial goo tube.
And they created a reactor, and the good or bad news is, I suppose, it works. And so
So what is the reaction? Is it power, or is it what are they getting out of it?
This is to produce the Vegemite-like microbial goo.
Oh, you're going to eat it.
cool.
You're not, and I should stress, you're not eating anything that you have. It's completely safe.
Yeah, you're filtering.
And it's all
yeah.
filtration.
If I go to a restaurant, I don't want them to go, it is completely safe.
Yes, it was once your shit, but it's not anymore. People change.
I thought as well, when you said about smearing stuff on walls, I thought that was a thing that they were talking about deep space exploration. Because one of the problems that you have when you're flying further into space is that you go into these radiation bands where suddenly you're just getting smashed by it. And if you put poo all over your walls...
On the outside of the spaceship.
Oh, is it on the outside?
I believe so.
Who's doing that job?
I thought it was on the inside. Yeah, who's
going outside?
You can go on a spacewalk.
You can
And
go on a
smear shit.
spacewalk.
What does your son do at NASA again? Penis PDFs, actually. Just tell them, Arthur. He smears shit on the outside of a spaceship, and we should be proud of him. Jesus Christ.
You can imagine slowly, you're sort of like 30 years into an intergalactic mission. You're outside your spaceship. You're smearing your latest batch of shit on the outside going, they're taking the fucking piss, aren't they?
I should have done that drama degree, man. It's like, this was not worth it.
Think of a fucking
Go to
muppet.
space, they said. See the universe, they said.
I like that you thought it was on the inside. That was normal. You were like, living in like a shithole.
Well, that makes more sense.
Should we?
Then going on a spacewalk to smear shit all over your ship? Yeah, I think it does.
Whereas I can just imagine NASA checking in with you, Dad, a few months into the mission. Sorry, astronaut Schreiber, we lost control, and have you been?
Damn, what the? Okay, send him home. Send him home.
Right. Astronaut Schreiber, you're going to need to turn your entire spaceship inside out.
No, Dan, you need to poo into the tube.
Right.
Wait, I'm meant to filter it before eating it? The video on PooTube isn't loading. I couldn't see it.
Recycling.
Recycling. Paper, right?
Paper.
This is insane. Okay, you recycle paper.
Sure.
And then...
If you don't, shame on you.
If you don't, and then you have recycled paper.
It's one of the easy ones.
You recycle it again, right? It's one of those things that you can just keep recycling. It turns out that you can only recycle paper 7 times. The same number of times
you can fold it. Yes.
Isn't that spooky?
That is spooky. The tree knows. The tree is like, no more. Wrap me in wool and put me in the ground.
It's kind of like the sort of Doctor Who regeneration limit, isn't it?
Can I ask a question though? When you're recycling, so I want to recycle this paper and I put it in my recycling bin. How do I know if it's been recycled 7 times and I'm wasting... wasting more recycling?
This is nice paper, as in the paper that it gets.
Thank you.
Like it gets a bit rougher, doesn't it?
It does.
Like the sort of rough, low quality pulpy paper.
Oh, okay. So
like cheap notebooks will be made of that, and then there are probably some industrial uses.
Yeah, but then if you've got a cheap notebook, should you put what should you put in there? I'm not the only one who's stressed about this, right?
No, absolutely.
Because you put so much in there, then you go to the big bin on the estate, right? And it's full of fucking plastic bags because no one reads the sign properly. And then is it worth me doing it? In that whole bin, someone contaminates the bin.
I don't think we're saying don't recycle.
Okay.
I think that's... Karen, I'm going to really bite down on this.
No, you should do it, and I do it, but it's frustrating.
I know. I know.
You have to be careful what you recycle.
That's
Wind
fair.
turbine blades, they wear out sometimes.
Yep.
And they're really difficult to recycle.
Ooh.
Okay, because they're made of lots of different polymers and stuff.
Controversial.
They've got a new one, a new kind of material that they might use for turbine blades, and you can recycle it by eating it.
No.
Oh, wow.
You just get some microbial goo, and then you spread it on top, and then you...
And so what's it made of?
It's made of fiberglass.
Yeah.
But as well as fiberglass, it's got some plant-derived polymers, it's got some synthetic polymers in. And once it's been working for ages and you need to replace it, you can kind of dissolve it and all the constituent parts separate.
Wow.
And you can reuse all those different bits.
Wow.
And the plant-based ones you can turn into gummy bears. And the guy who invented it has made a wind turbine, then dissolved it, turned it into a gummy bear, and eaten those gummy bears.
I mean, I like gummy bears already. If I find out that I'm eating gummy bears, which are made from renewable energy turbines, I'm going to be over the fucking moon. That is so good. One thing that can be recycled that has been a bit of a bane of the recycling industry for a while is nappies.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes they contain lots of different components and it can be hard to separate them. This is a really good study from this year. It's researchers from Indonesia, actually just where your original fact is from, James, and researchers have found a way of taking nappies, used nappies, washing, drying, sterilizing, shredding them, right? and then putting them into concrete and mortar.
Wow.
And they have successfully built a home that is 10% old nappies.
Wow.
And it's completely sterile. It's completely and it can use 2 cubic meters of used nappies, one single-story home, without any weakness of structure or integrity or anything like that. And it's completely safe. It uses up a load. I think that is about the amount a baby gets through in a year or two.
Not my baby. We could build half of Milton Keynes if that she gets through.
So that's just a trial so far. But
That's
even,
amazing.
Even in the UK, half of the Welsh A487 road is made of 100,000 nappies.
Amazing.
And they would just
That's
recycle
so
into,
good.
I know, plastic pellets that are then part of the road material, and then you tarmac over the top.
So when we were talking about the 3 Little Pigs earlier blowing down a shit house, that actually could be a reality
Not far
in
off.
the future.
Yeah.
Nappy house.
We're going to have to wrap up in a sec, guys. We are at the end of the party. Yeah, so sorry.
It's time.
It's time.
Yeah.
Anything before we do?
You can recycle rare earth metals using fish sperm.
Done. We're done. We're done. No one can talk. That's it.
Is that the stuff you get those in your phone, don't you?
The rare earth metals. Yeah. This is a thing. It's milt. Milt is the technical name for fish sperm, basically. So the scientists use some. It's at the experimental stage. It's not widely used, but they made a powder out of some salmon milt because that is largely composed of DNA, which largely is made up of phosphate, right? And it's charged in a way that it attracts rare earth metals to it.
Cool.
So if you put it in a solution with some rare earth metals, because they're very important to recycle, and you want to recycle as much as you can, keep it in the system going around. And if you put it in a solution with some salmon sperm, then it can be
How
extracted.
much sperm do you need? Are we going to have to farm fish and make them ejaculate millions of times?
I think that is the problem of scale in this. You're absolutely right, because it's like a salmon is quite small, and it is a waste product for the fish industry, but it's not.
Not if you're a Mrs. Salmon.
How are you getting the milt? How do you collect milt? I'm just asking for a friend.
I don't know.
The milkman just comes round, doesn't he?
Okay, that's it. That is all of our facts. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get in contact with any of us about the things we have said over the course of this podcast, we can be found on our Twitter accounts. I'm on @Schreiberland. James.
@James Harkin.
Andy.
@Andrew Hunter M.
Cariad.
@Cariad Lloyd on Instagram.
And you can also get us on our group account on Twitter, which is @NoSuchThing. Go to our website as well, nossuchthingasafish.com. All of our previous episodes are up there, and you can also join Club Fish. We got any Club Fish members? Yeah, very nice, very cool. It's a secret society for dorks, and it's awesome. So do join that. Otherwise, join us again next week for another episode. We'll see you then. Thank you so much, Soho Theatre. That was awesome. Goodbye.